The desert wind carried grit through the gaps in the barn walls, same as it had every night since Samuel died. Margaret Thornton wrapped her shawl tighter and lifted the kerosene lamp higher, checking on the horses one last time before bed. The animals shifted restlessly in their stalls, nostrils flaring at something she couldn't see or smell. "Easy now, Belle," she murmured to her mare, running a weathered hand along the horse's neck. "Just the wind playing tricks again." But Belle's ears remained pinned back, her eyes rolling white at the corners. The other horses stamped and snorted, pressing against their stall doors. Margaret had lived on the Arizona frontier long enough to trust animal instinct over her own tired senses. She set the lamp on a barrel and reached for the Winchester propped in the corner. The weight of it felt both foreign and familiar in her hands. Samuel had taught her to shoot, but she'd never had cause to use it on anything more than rattlesnakes and the occasional coyote. A soft groan drifted from the far corner of the barn. Behind the stacked hay bales, human, definitely human. Margaret's heart hammered against her ribs as she raised the rifle. "Who's there? Show yourself, or I'll shoot." Silence stretched between heartbeats. Then, a voice deep, strained with pain, speaking words she didn't understand. Not English, not Spanish either, though she'd picked up enough from the Mexican traders to get by. This was something else, something that made the hair on her arms stand up. "I said show yourself." Her voice cracked despite her attempt at authority. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with the careful precision of the badly wounded. The lamplight caught bronze skin slick with sweat, long black hair matted with blood, and eyes dark as the desert night. An Apache warrior. That much was clear from his dress, or what remained of it. His buckskin shirt hung in tatters, revealing a gunshot wound high on his left shoulder that still seeped crimson. He swayed on his feet, one hand pressed against the barn wall for support. When he spoke again, it was in heavily accented English. "I mean no harm." Margaret kept the rifle trained on his chest, though her hands trembled. She'd heard the stories. Of course, everyone in Willow Creek had. Apache raids on settlements, soldiers hunting war parties, violence begetting violence in an endless cycle. But the man before her looked less like a fearsome warrior and more like any other soul clinging to life by a thread. "You're shot," she stated the obvious, buying time while her mind raced. The proper thing, the safe thing, would be to fire a warning shot, drive him off, or ride to town for the sheriff. But something in his eyes stopped her. Pain. Yes, but also a bone-deep exhaustion that she recognized in her own reflection every morning. "Soldiers," he managed. Then his knees buckled. Margaret moved without thinking, dropping the rifle to catch him before he hit the ground. He was heavier than he looked, solid muscle despite his lean frame. His skin burned with fever against her hands. "Damn fool woman," she muttered to herself as she struggled to drag him toward the house. "Samuel would have your hide for this." But Samuel was 6 months in the ground, and she was tired of talking to his ghost. The Apache warrior drifted in and out of consciousness as she half carried, half dragged him across the yard. His breath came in short gasps, and once he muttered something in his own language that sounded like a prayer or a curse. Margaret's small adobe house sat squat against the starlit sky, windows dark save for the dying embers visible through the kitchen window. She shouldered the door open and guided him to the narrow bed in the back room, the one she'd shared with Samuel until the pneumonia took him last winter. In the better light of the house, she could see the true extent of his injuries. The bullet wound was bad enough, but there were also knife cuts along his ribs, bruises mottling his chest and arms. Whatever fight he'd been in, he'd given as good as he got. She lit more lamps and set water to boil, her movements automatic from years of tending Samuel through various injuries, broken bones from ornery horses, gashes from barbed wire, the 100 small hurts that came with trying to scratch a living from unforgiving land. The Apache's eyes fluttered open as she cut away the remains of his shirt. He tensed, hand moving toward where a knife would have hung at his belt. "Easy," Margaret said, showing him her empty hands before reaching for the clean rags and bottle of whiskey she'd fetched. "This is going to hurt something fierce, but it's got to be done." He studied her face for a long moment, then gave the slightest nod. The bullet had passed clean through, which was a mercy. Margaret cleaned the wound as best she could, trying not to think about how the lamplight played across the planes of his chest, the way his jaw clenched against the pain without making a sound. She'd been alone too long if she was noticing such things about a half-dead stranger who could bring nothing but trouble to her door. "What's your name?" she asked as she worked, needing to fill the silence with something other than his labored breathing and her own racing thoughts. "Joseph," he said after a pause. "The mission school called me Joseph." She glanced up at that. "Mission school?" His laugh was bitter as the whiskey she poured over his wound. 10 years. They tried to make me white, cut my hair, beat me for speaking Apache, said they would save my soul." Margaret knew of such places, where Indian children were taken to be civilized. She'd never thought much about it before, but looking at the man on her bed caught between two worlds, welcome in neither, she felt a flutter of understanding. "And now," she prompted, wrapping clean bandages around his shoulder. "Now I am nothing. Not Apache enough for my people, not white enough for yours." His eyes found hers, dark and fathomless. "The soldiers shot me for helping a rancher's family escape a raid. My own people cast me out for warning them. So I run, I hide, I die slowly instead of quickly." "You're not dying," Margaret said firmly, tying off the bandage. "Not in my house, anyway." "Why?" The question hung between them, loaded with more weight than its single syllable should carry. "You should have let me bleed in your barn, called the sheriff, collected whatever bounty they offer for Apache scalps these days." Margaret sat back on her heels, considering why indeed she thought of the empty evenings, the silence that pressed against her eardrums, the way she'd started talking to the horses just to hear a voice even her own. "Maybe I'm tired of death," she said finally. "Buried my husband 6 months past. Watched the life drain out of him day by day. Nothing I could do to stop it. Maybe I wanted to thumb my nose at the Reaper, just this once." Joseph's expression softened slightly. "I am sorry for your loss." "Are you?" She couldn't keep the bitter edge from her voice. "Samuel died trying to protect this place from Apache raiders. Took a lance to the gut. Lingered for 3 days before the infection took him. Your people did that. And your people slaughtered women and children at Skeleton Canyon." Joseph replied quietly. "Cut down anyone who couldn't run fast enough. My sister among them. She was 14. Margaret felt the fight drain out of her. So much blood on both sides, an ocean of it stretching back years, decades. And here they sat, 2 people broken by loss, while the desert wind rattled the windows and reminded them both how alone they were. "I'm Margaret," she said at last. "Margaret Thornton, and you can stay until you're healed enough to travel. After that..." She shrugged. "After that, we'll see." Joseph nodded, exhaustion pulling at his features. "You are either very kind or very foolish, Margaret Thornton." "Probably both," she admitted, gathering up the bloody rags. "Get some rest. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything." She left him there, already sliding toward sleep, and tried not to think about what she'd just done. Harboring an Apache fugitive would bring nothing but trouble if anyone found out. The good people of Willow Creek barely tolerated her as it was a woman alone, trying to run a trading post and small ranch without a man's protection. This would give them all the excuse they needed to drive her out. But as she sat by the dying fire, listening to the stranger's labored breathing from the back room, Margaret found she didn't much care what the town thought anymore. She was 34 years old, childless, widowed, and hanging on to a life that felt less like living and more like slow suffocation with each passing day. Maybe it was time to court a little trouble. Maybe trouble was better than the crushing weight of nothing at all. Outside, a coyote howled at the stars, and the desert wind whispered secrets through the cracks in the walls. In the back room, Joseph muttered in his sleep Apache words mixing with Spanish and English in a fevered tangle that spoke of a man caught between worlds, belonging nowhere. Margaret understood that feeling all too well. The fever took hold on the second night, turning Joseph's bronze skin ashen and slick with sweat. Margaret had seen enough frontier sickness to know this was the dangerous time when the body either fought off the infection or surrendered to it. She moved her rocking chair into the sick room, keeping vigil with a basin of cool water and clean cloths. Every hour, she bathed his burning face and chest, changed the dressings on his wounds, and tried to coax water between his cracked lips. In his delirium, Joseph spoke in 3 languages, sometimes switching mid-sentence. The Apache words came fast and urgent, like prayers or battle cries. The Spanish emerged in gentle murmurs, perhaps memories of the mission school. But it was the English that broke her heart, because in English he sounded like a lost child. "Mother, I can't find you," he whispered on the 3rd night, unseeing eyes fixed on something beyond the adobe walls. "They cut my hair. They said it would make me clean, but I feel dirty. Why did you let them take me?" Margaret dampened another cloth and pressed it to his forehead. "Shh. You're safe now. Rest." His hand caught hers, grip surprisingly strong despite the fever. "Don't leave me in the dark. The closet is so small, and Brother Francis locks it from outside when I speak Apache. Please." She squeezed his fingers gently. "No darkness here. See, the lamp is lit. You're not in any closet." As the night wore on, she found herself talking just to fill the silence, to give him something to anchor to besides his fevered memories. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about meeting Samuel at a church social when she was 17, and knowing within a week that she'd follow him anywhere, even to this God-forsaken stretch of Arizona territory. "He had such grand plans," she said, wringing out another cloth. "We'd build a trading post. He said, grow it into a proper store, maybe even a town one day, with our name on it. Thornton, Arizona. Had a nice ring to it, he thought." Joseph's breathing seemed to calm at the sound of her voice, so she continued. "First year was hard. Everything died, the vegetables, the chickens, even the flowers I tried to grow by the door. Samuel said I was trying to make the desert into something it wasn't. Had to learn to work with the land, not against it. Took me 3 years to get anything to grow in that garden plot out back." She gestured toward the window, though Joseph couldn't see it. "Got tomatoes now, peppers, even some melon if the rabbits don't get to it first. Samuel never did get to taste those melons." Her voice caught. She cleared her throat and dipped the cloth again. "Anyway, the trading post does all right. Travelers heading to California, locals needing supplies. I manage. The books balance, mostly. Sam taught me numbers before he passed. Said a woman alone needs to know her figures so no one can cheat her." Joseph stirred, his fever finally starting to break. Sweat poured off him, soaking through the sheets. Margaret helped him sit up enough to drink some water mixed with willow bark tea. "You talk to all your patients this much?" he asked weakly. The first coherent words he'd spoken in 2 days. "Only the ones who can't escape," she replied, surprised to find herself almost smiling. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been dragged behind a horse through a cactus patch." He winced as he tried to shift position. "How long?" 3 days. You've been fighting hard." He studied her face, noting the shadows under her eyes, the wrinkled dress she hadn't changed. "You stayed. Someone had to. You were calling out something fierce, switching between languages like a Mexican trader at a horse auction." Something that might have been embarrassment crossed his features. "What did I say?" "Nothing that bears repeating." She busied herself straightening the covers. "Are you hungry? I've got broth on the stove." Over the next days, as Joseph's strength slowly returned, they developed an odd rhythm. Margaret would tend the store during the day, nervously watching for anyone who might ask too many questions about the occasional sound from the back room. In the evenings, she'd bring him meals and they'd talk carefully at first, then with growing ease. Joseph told her about the mission school in more detail, how they'd stripped him of his Apache name, Eyes That See Far, and given him a Christian one, how they'd beaten the language out of him, only to find he'd need it again when he returned to his people at 17. "But I came back changed," he said one evening, struggling to sit up straighter against the pillows. "My words were clumsy. I moved wrong, dressed wrong, even ate wrong. The other warriors laughed, called me apple red outside, white inside." "That why you left?" Margaret asked, handing him a cup of coffee. She'd discovered he liked it strong and black, same as Samuel had. "No, I tried to prove myself. Joined war parties, raided with the best of them, but then—" He stared into the coffee as if it held answers. "There was this family, settlers, like you and your husband. They had a little girl, maybe 6 years old, red hair like sunset." Margaret waited, sensing the weight of what was coming. "The war party wanted to kill them all. It was justice, they said, for what the soldiers did at Skeleton Canyon. But all I could see was my sister at that age, before the soldiers came. So I warned them, helped them escape in the night." "And your people found out?" "A warrior saw me, told the others. They said I was no Apache, that my white heart had finally shown itself. They cast me out, neither Apache nor white. Just nothing." Margaret understood that feeling of being caught between worlds. She'd felt it herself since Samuel died, no longer a wife, not quite a widow in the eyes of the town, just existing in some liminal space where she didn't quite fit anywhere. "The soldiers you helped," she said. "They're the ones who shot you." Joseph's laugh was hollow. "Different soldiers. They saw an Apache alone, assumed I was scouting for a war party. Didn't matter that I spoke English, that I tried to explain. An Apache is an Apache to them." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the desert wind singing its eternal song outside. Margaret found herself studying his profile in the lamplight, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair fell across his shoulders now that it was clean and unbound. She'd washed it for him during the worst of the fever, surprised by its softness, like black silk between her fingers. "You're staring," Joseph said without turning. Heat crept up her neck. "Sorry, I was just— You look better, healthier." "Thanks to you." He did turn then, those dark eyes holding hers. "Why do you really help me? Margaret Thornton, the truth this time." She considered lying, giving him the same half-answer as before. But something about the quiet intimacy of the sick room, the way the lamplight made the world beyond these walls seem far away, loosened her tongue. "Because I'm lonely," she admitted. "Because I talk to horses and chickens and Samuel's grave marker just to hear a voice. Because some mornings I wake up and wonder why I bother getting out of bed at all. And then you stumbled into my barn, more dead than alive, and suddenly I had a reason to care about something again." Joseph reached out, his fingers brushing hers where they rested on the quilt. "I understand. Do you—" "The mission taught me your Christ story, how he was caught between heaven and earth, belonging to both and neither. I think maybe that's what we are. You and I, caught between. Maybe that's why the spirits led me to your barn." Margaret turned her hand palm up, letting their fingers intertwine. His hand was calloused, but gentle, warm against her skin. She couldn't remember the last time someone had touched her with such care. Samuel had been gone so long, and even before the sickness took him, they'd grown distant, like strangers sharing a house. "Your fever's gone," she said unnecessarily, needing to break the spell before she did something foolish. "You'll be strong enough to travel soon." Joseph's fingers tightened on hers. "What if I don't want to travel?" The question hung between them, dangerous as a loaded gun. Margaret pulled her hand away, standing abruptly. "You can't stay here. People will find out. They'll come for both of us." "Then come with me," he said, the words tumbling out as if he'd been holding them back. "We could go west to California, or south to Mexico. Somewhere we could just be people." You're talking nonsense. Fever's still affecting your mind. But even as she busied herself gathering the empty dishes, Margaret's heart raced at the possibility. Leave everything behind. Start over somewhere where no one knew their names or their histories. It was madness. It was impossible. It was the first thing in 6 months that had made her feel truly alive. The afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window as Joseph sat at Margaret's table, carefully mending a broken bridle with steady hands. He'd been helping with small tasks around the property for a week now, insisting he needed to earn his keep while he recovered. Margaret watched from the doorway, noting how natural he looked there. How right. "You're quiet today," she observed, entering with a basket of eggs from the henhouse. Joseph set down the leather. "I was remembering something. May I tell you?" She nodded, settling across from him. In the days since his fever broke, they'd developed this rhythm-sharing stories like trading precious stones, each revelation bringing them closer to understanding. "When I was 12, he began, "at the mission school, there was a priest named Father Miguel. He was different from the others. Mexican, not American. He spoke to us in Spanish when the other brothers weren't listening." Margaret began cleaning the eggs, listening. "One day he found me crying behind the chapel. I'd been beaten for singing an Apache morning song. He sat with me and said something I never forgot. He said, 'Joseph, you think they're trying to kill the Apache in you, but what they don't understand is that by teaching you their ways, they're making you stronger. You'll walk in both worlds. That's power, not weakness.'" "Wise man," Margaret said softly. He taught me to read beyond what the school required. Shakespeare, Cervantes, even some books the mission would have burned if they'd known. He said education was the only weapon they couldn't take away. Joseph's fingers traced the edge of the table. "He died my last year there. Cholera, but his words stayed." "Is that why you went back to your people to use what you'd learned?" Joseph's smile was rueful. "I thought I could be a bridge. Help my people understand the white world. Maybe find a way to coexist. But bridges get walked on from both sides. Neither trusted me enough to listen." Margaret felt the familiar ache of understanding. "Samuel used to say I was too soft for frontier life, too quick to see both sides of things. Said it would get me killed one day. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe seeing both sides is what keeps us human." She looked at him then. Really looked. The afternoon light caught the angles of his face, the mixture of strength and gentleness that seemed to define him. His hair was tied back with a strip of leather she'd given him, revealing the small scar near his temple where a mission barber had been too rough with the shears. "Tell me more," she said, "about before the mission, when you were eyes that see far." Something shifted in his expression, a deepening that made her heart skip. "You want to know about that boy? I want to know about you, all of you." Joseph was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak, his voice taking on a different cadence, as if the memories themselves changed his way of forming words. "I was born in the Dragoon Mountains, during the moon of Little Eagles, what you call February. My father was a warrior named Broken Lance. My mother was taken in a raid from Mexico, but she became Apache in her heart. She gave me my name because even as a baby, I would stare at the horizon like I could see beyond it." Margaret found herself leaning forward, drawn into his story. "We moved with the seasons, summer in the high places, winter in the warm valleys. I learned to track before I could properly walk. My grandfather taught me to read sign, not just animal tracks, but the story they told, where the deer was going, why it was running, how long since it passed." His hands moved as he spoke, painting pictures in the air. "When I was 7, I went on my first rabbit hunt alone, got lost in a canyon for 2 days. My mother was frantic, but my father said to wait. 'The boy has far-seeing eyes,' he said. 'He'll find his way.' And I did, following stars I'd memorized. That's when they knew my name was true." "You must have been terrified," Margaret said. "I was, but also free. Just me and the desert and the spirits. I've been chasing that feeling ever since." His eyes met hers. Until now. The weight of those two words settled between them. Margaret felt heat rise in her cheeks, but didn't look away. The mission must have been like cutting off a limb. Joseph finished. They came when I was 10. Soldiers and Indian agents, rounding up children for their own good. My mother tried to hide me, but they found us. I'll never forget her face as they put me in the wagon. She knew she'd never see me again. Did she? No. When I came back 7 years later, she was gone. Died in the winter of '78, my uncle said. Coughing sickness. My father had been killed in a raid the year before. I was orphaned in every way that mattered. Margaret reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. I'm sorry. Don't pity me. I survived, learned, grew stronger. Like Father Miguel said. He turned his hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. But I've been searching for home ever since, a place where all the pieces of me could exist together. And have you found it? The question came out barely above a whisper. Joseph's thumb traced circles on her palm. I'm beginning to think I have. The moment stretched between them, fragile and enormous. Margaret knew she should pull away, make some excuse about chores or supper. Instead, she found herself saying, Tell me about the family, the ones you saved. Joseph's hand tightened on hers. The Millers. They had a claim near Benson. Good people, trying to make a life. The war party tracked them for 2 days. I was supposed to scout their defenses, but when I saw them, the little girl was singing to a corn-husk doll, the same song my sister used to sing. So you warned them? I did more than that. I led them through the mountains at night, showed them trails the war party wouldn't expect, got them to Fort Huachuca safely. The Father Thomas he tried to pay me. Can you imagine I'd just betrayed my people, and he wanted to give me silver? What happened then? I wandered, tried to find work at ranches, but no one trusts an Apache cowhand. Tried to go back to the reservation, but word had spread about what I'd done. He paused, searching for words. In my language, we say Inda Dish Ni. It means neither nor, not Apache, not white, not anything. Margaret squeezed his fingers. You're something. You're here. You're real. That counts. Does it? Sometimes I feel like a ghost, haunting the edge of 2 worlds that don't want me. I want you. The words escaped before she could stop them. Margaret felt her face flame, but she didn't take them back. Joseph stood slowly, moving around the table without releasing her hand. He drew her to her feet, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. Margaret. I know, she whispered. I know all the reasons this is impossible. I know what people would say, what they'd do. I'm tired of being careful, of being proper, of being empty. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You're not empty. You're the fullest person I've known, full of kindness and strength and stories and... She silenced him by pressing her lips to his, a soft, desperate meeting that tasted of coffee and possibility. He made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, his hand sliding into her hair. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Margaret felt as if the world had tilted on its axis. Everything looked the same, her simple kitchen, the afternoon sun, the basket of eggs on the table, but nothing would ever be quite the same again. This changes things, Joseph said quietly. Everything's already changed. She rested her forehead against his chest, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek. The moment you stumbled into my barn, everything changed. He held her like that for a long moment, his chin resting on top of her head. Outside, she could hear the normal sounds of the desert afternoon chickens scratching, wind in the mesquite trees, the distant cry of a hawk. But here in this bubble of warmth and connection, the rest of the world felt very far away. What do we do now? Joseph asked. Margaret pulled back enough to look up at him. I don't know, but for the first time in months, not knowing doesn't scare me. He smiled then, A real smile that transformed his usually serious face. The boy with far-seeing eyes and the woman who sees both sides. What a pair we make. "Tell me more," she said, leading him to sit beside her on the worn settee Samuel had hauled from Missouri. "Tell me about the songs your sister sang. Tell me about the stars you followed home. Tell me everything." So he did. And the afternoon melted into evening as they traded stories and stolen kisses, building a bridge between their worlds one word at a time. Neither spoke of tomorrow or the dangers that waited beyond these walls. For now, it was enough to not be alone, to be seen and known and wanted despite, or perhaps because of all the broken places inside them. When darkness finally fell, Joseph rose to return to the back room where he'd been sleeping, but Margaret caught his hand. "Stay," she said. "Just stay with me. I don't mean I just don't want to be alone tonight." He understood. They lay together on her narrow bed, fully clothed, her head on his shoulder and his arms around her. For the first time since Samuel died, maybe for the first time ever, Margaret felt truly held, not possessed or claimed, but simply held by someone who knew what it meant to be lost and was brave enough to keep searching for home. "Eyes that see far," she murmured as sleep tugged at her. "What?" "It suits you. You saw me when no one else was looking." His arms tightened around her. "Inda dishnai," he whispered back. "Neither nor, but maybe that's not such a bad thing, if we're neither nor together." Margaret smiled against his chest and let sleep take her, dreaming of bridges that could bear the weight of two wandering souls. The trading post bell jangled as Mrs. Henderson swept in, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of the store. Margaret forced a pleasant smile, though her heart raced knowing Joseph was just beyond the curtain in the storage room, sorting grain sacks. "Morning, Mrs. Henderson. What can I help you with today?" "Need coffee and flour, and some of that ribbon if you've got any left." The older woman's gaze lingered on Margaret's face. "You're looking well these days, almost glowing." "Just keeping busy," Margaret replied, measuring out flour with hands that wanted to tremble. "The spring weather agrees with me." Mrs. Henderson watched her work. "Funny thing, though, Tom Garrett says he saw smoke from your chimney late at night last week, more than once." Margaret kept her expression neutral. "I've been doing some extra baking, trying new recipes." "Is that so, because Martha Primrose swears she heard men's voices when she passed by Tuesday evening?" The storage room curtain shifted slightly. Margaret willed Joseph to stay hidden. "Must have been the wind," she said. "It plays tricks through the canyon." Mrs. Henderson's eyes narrowed. "Margaret Thornton, you're not taking in boarders. Are you a woman alone? Shouldn't The bell jangled again as Jake Cutter shouldered through the door, whiskey already on his breath despite the early hour. Margaret's stomach dropped. Of all the people in Willow Creek, Cutter was the last she wanted here now. Well, Mrs. Thornton." His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Looking prettier than ever. Widowhood suits you." Mr. Cutter," she kept her voice cold. "What do you need?" "Now, is that any way to greet a customer?" He leaned on the counter. Too close. Especially one who's been so patient about that loan Samuel took out. Margaret's hands stilled. "That loan was paid. I have the papers." "Papers can be misplaced. Memories get fuzzy." His smile was predatory. "Course, we could work out a different arrangement. A woman like you shouldn't have to worry about such things." "The loan is paid," she repeated firmly. Cutter reached across the counter, his meaty hand covering hers. "Come now, Margaret. We both know you need protection out here. I could—" The curtain swept aside and Joseph emerged, moving with the fluid grace of a hunter. He carried a grain sack on his shoulder, his expression carefully blank, but his presence filled the room like a gathering storm. Cutter jerked back, hand moving to his sidearm. "What the hell is this?" My hired hand, Margaret said quickly. Joseph's been helping with the heavy work. Joseph! Cutter's face twisted. That's an Apache if I ever saw one. You lost your mind. Woman. Mrs. Henderson gasped, pressing herself against the far wall. Margaret Thornton, you've got a savage in your store. He's civilized, Margaret said, hating the word even as she used it. Mission educated. He speaks 3 languages and can read better than half the men in this town. Joseph set down the grain sack with deliberate calm. When he spoke, his English was perfect, with just enough mission school formality to be non-threatening. Good morning. I apologize if my presence disturbs you, Mrs. Thornton was kind enough to offer work when I was passing through. Passing through to where? Cutter demanded. Back to your war parties. To California. I have papers from Father Miguel at San Xavier Mission. Joseph pulled a folded document from his shirt. I'm a Christian Indian, seeking honest work. Margaret watched him perform this role, the safe Indian, the tamed savage, and her heart broke a little. She'd seen the real man, the one who spoke of stars and spirits, who carried centuries of stories in his blood. This diminished version was what the world demanded. Cutter snatched the papers, squinting at them. These could be forged. They bear the mission seal. Joseph said mildly, You're welcome to verify with Father Miguel, though it's a long ride to Tucson. I don't care if you've got papers from the Pope himself. Cutter snarled. No Apache works in this town, and no decent woman would. His eyes darted between them. Ugly speculation dawning. Unless you're not decent anymore. Watch your tongue, Margaret snapped. Oh, I see how it is. Cutter's laugh was ugly. Samuel not cold 6 months and you're taking up with a savage. What would he think? Get out! Margaret's voice shook with fury. Get out of my store! Your store for how long? Cutter backed toward the door, but his threat hung in the air. Wait till folks hear about this. A white woman and her Apache. Joseph moved then, not threatening but simply stepping between Cutter and Margaret. The lady asked you to leave. For a moment, violence crackled in the air. Then Cutter spat on the floor and stormed out, Mrs. Henderson scurrying after him. Through the window, Margaret could see them already talking animatedly to others on the street. Well, she said into the sudden quiet, that's done it. Joseph turned to her, his carefully blank expression cracking to show the concern beneath. I'm sorry. I should have stayed hidden. For how long? Forever? She came around the counter to him. I'm tired of hiding. They'll make trouble for you now. Real trouble. They've been making trouble since Samuel died. At least now it's for something worthwhile. She touched his arm. You didn't have to pretend like that. The Mission Indian Act. It's not an act. It's one of my truths. His smile was sad. Just not the only one. The bell jangled again. They sprang apart, but it was only Charlie Diggs, the old prospector who traded gold dust for supplies. He looked between them with rheumy eyes. Heard shoutin', he said. That Cutter bothering you again. Ms. Margaret. Nothing I can't handle. Charlie. The old man studied Joseph for a long moment. You the one's been helping out fix that roof leak mighty fine. Been meaning to thank you. Joseph blinked in surprise. You're welcome. My daddy fought in the Mexican War. Charlie continued conversationally. Said the Apache scouts were the best trackers he ever saw. Saved his unit more'n once. He set a small leather pouch on the counter. Need coffee and beans. Ms. Margaret. And maybe your helper could look at my mule's hoof been favoring it something fierce. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected kindness. Of course, Charlie, Joseph, would you mind? As Joseph followed Charlie out to examine the mule, Margaret watched through the window. Already, she could see people gathering, pointing, whispering. By nightfall, everyone in Willow Creek would know. The day passed in tense normalcy. Some customers came as usual, though they eyed Joseph warily. Others made excuses to peer through the windows without buying anything. Around noon, Reverend Blackwood appeared, speaking earnestly about Christian charity while clearly fishing for scandal. Through it all, Joseph worked steadily hauling supplies, fixing a broken shelf, serving customers with quiet dignity. Their eyes would meet across the store, and in those glances lived whole conversations. Late afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, Maria Delgado, who ran the boarding house. Slipped in just before closing. "Mrs. Thornton," she said in accented English. "I hear what people say is not right." Margaret braced for another confrontation, but Maria continued. "My husband, he was Yaqui, different tribe, but still Indian to these people. I know how they look, how they talk." She glanced at Joseph, switching to rapid Spanish. "You're the one who helped the Miller family, aren't you? Thomas Miller is my cousin." Joseph straightened. "Senora, He wrote me, told me about the Apache who risked everything to save them." She turned back to Margaret. "This is a good man, but you must be careful. Cutter has friends, and they've been drinking." As if summoned by her words, shouts erupted from the street, through the window. Margaret could see a group of men gathering, Cutter at their center. The late sun glinted off gun metal. "Out the back," Maria urged. "Both of you, now." But Margaret was done running, done hiding. She grabbed the shotgun from beneath the counter. "This is my store, my land. I won't be driven off." "Margaret," Joseph said quietly, "there are too many." Then we faced them together. She met his eyes. "Unless you want to slip away, I wouldn't blame you." His answer was to check his own weapon, a pistol she'd given him from Samuel's things. Together, the mob reached the porch. Cutter's voice boomed through the door. "Thornton, send out that Apache, and we'll let you be. You're confused, is all lonely, we understand. But this ends now." Margaret moved to the window. "The only thing ending is your welcome in my store. Jake Cutter, all of you go home." "Can't do that." This from Bill Stevens, who ran the saloon. "Got a reputation to protect. Can't have Apache bucks thinking they can come here and take our women." "Nobody's taken anything," Margaret shouted back. "I hired a man to work, that's all." "That ain't what it looked like this morning. Someone called. Way jumped to defend you." "Would you prefer he let Cutter manhandle me?" Uneasy murmurs from the crowd. Not all of them were comfortable with Cutter's behavior, even if they hated Apaches. Enough talk. Cutter stepped onto the porch. "You've got 1 minute to send him out, or we're coming in." Joseph touched her shoulder. "Let me go. I've brought you enough trouble." "No." She cocked the shotgun. "I've been dead inside for months. You made me remember what living feels like. That's worth fighting for." His hand covered hers on the gun stock. "Then we fight." The minute passed like an hour. Margaret's heart hammered, but her hands were steady. Beside her, Joseph was perfectly still, the calm before violence she'd seen in him that first night. "Time's up!" Cutter roared. The door exploded inward. The shotgun blast over their heads stopped the mob cold. Margaret pumped another shell into the chamber, plaster dust raining from where she'd deliberately aimed high. "Next one won't be a warning," she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. "My property, my rules, get out." The men hesitated at the doorway, suddenly less brave facing armed resistance. Cutter pushed forward, face mottled with rage and whiskey. "You'd shoot white men over a savage. I'd shoot any man who breaks down my door." She kept the gun trained on his chest. "Apache or white, makes no difference to me." "Listen to yourself," Stevens called from behind Cutter. "That buck's got you turned around. This ain't you, Margaret." Joseph stepped slightly forward, hands visible but ready. "Mrs. Thornton has asked you to leave. In your own law, she has that right." "Don't you speak of our law, Indian." Cutter snarled, "You got no rights here." "Actually, he does." A new voice from the doorway made everyone turn. Judge Howard Pike shouldered through the crowd, his silver beard and black suit giving him natural authority. "Evening, Mrs. Thornton. Gentlemen." "Judge," Margaret acknowledged, not lowering her weapon. "Come to join the mob. Come to prevent bloodshed." Pike's eyes swept the room. "And remind folks that Arizona territory has laws. Man works for wages. That's between him and his employer. Man breaks into private property." He looked pointedly at the damaged door. "Well, that's another matter entirely." "He's Apache," Cutter protested. "They killed Sam Thornton." "Different Apache," Pike said mildly. "Unless you're saying they all look alike to you. Jake, because that sounds like the kind of ignorance I'd expect from back east, not from frontier folk who should know better." Some of the men shifted uncomfortably. Pike had fought in the Apache Wars himself, but he'd also been fair in his dealings with peaceful Indians. His word carried weight. "Now," Pike continued, "I suggest everyone go home. Cool off. Think about whether you want to be the men who attacked a widow in her own store." He paused. "Sheriff Morrison's on his way. By the by, had to ride out to the Carson place this morning, but Maria Delgado sent her boy to fetch him. Should be here within the hour." The threat of real law enforcement took the wind from the mob's sails. They began to mutter and drift away, though Cutter lingered. "This ain't over," he told Margaret. "Your man, your husband, he borrowed from more folks than just me. They'll come collecting, and you won't have a judge and sheriff to hide behind every time." "Is that a threat?" Pike asked. Cutter spat tobacco juice, just missing Joseph's boot. "Just facts." He looked at Margaret with cold eyes. Samuel knew what was what. Shame his widow doesn't. After he left, Margaret finally lowered the shotgun, her arms trembling from holding it so long. Joseph moved to check the door, testing if it would still close despite the damage. "Thank you, Judge," Margaret said. Pike waved off her gratitude. "Just doing my job, though I'd be lying if I said this won't cause talk." He studied Joseph. "You're the one who helped the Millers." "Yes, sir. Thomas Miller's a good man. Says you saved his family's lives." Pike stroked his beard. "That counts for something with me, but Cutter's not wrong about the debts. Samuel did borrow from several folks before he passed. They've been patient with Mrs. Thornton. But this," he gestured vaguely, "this gives them excuse to call in those markers." Margaret's heart sank. "How much?" "Near as I can figure, about $300 total, maybe more. It might as well have been $3,000. The store barely broke even most months." "I'll find a way," she said. "I'm sure you will." Pike moved to leave, then paused. "Word of advice. Whatever you two are planning, plan faster. Cutter's type doesn't stay scared long." After he left, Margaret and Joseph worked in silence to secure the broken door. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the store, Margaret finally spoke. "He's right. They'll come back. Maybe not as a mob, but in ways that are worse. Calling in debts, refusing to sell to me, turning the whole town against us." "Then we leave," Joseph said simply, "tonight." "And go where with what?" She laughed bitterly. "I've got maybe $40 saved, a wagon and horses. Whatever supplies we could carry, that won't get us far." Joseph moved closer, taking her hands. "I know places, hidden valleys where no one goes. We could live off the land until what? Until we starve, until they hunt us down." She pulled away, pacing. "I won't live like a fugitive. Better than not living at all." She stopped at his quiet words, the truth of them hitting home. How many times in the past months had she thought about Samuel's pistol, about how easy it would be to just stop, and now, when she finally had reason to live, the world seemed determined to crush it. "There might be another way," Joseph said slowly. "But you won't like it." "Tell me." He hesitated. Then, "My mother's people, the ones still free, hiding in the Sierra Madre. They trade sometimes, when they need supplies. Gold for guns and food. Gold. Apache gold. Hidden caches from the old days. My grandfather told me where one is, made me memorize the landmarks. He met her eyes. It's dangerous. The army patrols those areas. And if my people found us, they cast you out. For warning enemies. But stealing sacred gold, that would be worse. They'd hunt us forever. Margaret considered risk everything on a dangerous journey for gold that might not exist. It was madness. But then, so was staying here. How far? 3 days' ride into the mountains, maybe 4. If we left before dawn, we could be gone before anyone noticed. A knock at the damaged door interrupted them. Margaret grabbed the shotgun again, but a familiar voice called out. "Mrs. Thornton, it's Charlie Diggs. Got something for you." She opened the door cautiously. The old prospector stood there with a lumpy canvas bag. "Charlie, what's this?" He thrust the bag at her. "Been meaning to square my account. This should cover it and then some." Margaret felt the weight of the bag, heard the distinctive clink. "Charlie, I can't—" "Sure you can. Gold's no good to a man my age. Rather see it help good folks." He peered past her at Joseph. "You take care of her, son. She's worth more than all the gold in these mountains." Before they could protest further, he shuffled away into the darkness. Margaret opened the bag with shaking hands. Raw gold nuggets gleamed in the lamplight. Not a fortune, but enough. Maybe $200 worth. "Seems the spirits are speaking," Joseph said softly. "Or Charlie Diggs is an angel in disguise." She made a decision. "We leave tonight. Take what we can carry. Buy supplies in the next town. Head for your grandfather's gold." "Margaret, are you sure once we go?" She silenced him with a kiss, fierce and desperate. "I buried my life with Samuel. You brought me back. So yes, I'm sure." They worked quickly, loading the wagon with essentials: food, water, ammunition, tools. Margaret took only a few personal items: her mother's silver brush, Samuel's watch, the daguerreotype of her parents. Everything else she left behind. Let the vultures have it. As midnight approached, Joseph brought the horses around. Margaret took one last look at the store, the life she'd built and lost and was now abandoning. "Regrets?" Joseph asked. "No, just saying goodbye." He helped her onto the wagon seat, then paused. "Wait." He disappeared into the store, returning with something wrapped in cloth. "You forgot this." She unwrapped it to find the book he'd been reading, Shakespeare's sonnets, margins filled with notes in 3 languages. "Father Miguel gave it to me," he explained. "Said it would teach me about love in the English way. But I think I learned more about that from you." Margaret clutched the book, tears threatening. "Joseph!" "I need to tell you something. Before we go." He took a breath. "That night I stumbled into your barn, I was ready to die. Had been for months. Caught between worlds. Belonging nowhere. Then you found me, and for the first time in years, I wanted to live. Not just survive. Live." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because where we're going is dangerous. If something happens—" "Nothing will happen." "Margaret." His hands framed her face. "If something happens, I need you to know that these weeks with you were worth everything. You gave me back my name. Not Joseph, not eyes that see far, but something new. Something that belongs to both and neither." She covered his hands with hers. "What name is that?" "The man who loves Margaret Thornton." He smiled, sad and beautiful in the moonlight. "The man who'll follow her anywhere, into any danger, because life without her isn't life at all." The words he'd whispered that night in her kitchen came back to her. The dangerous promise that had started all this: "You'll beg me to claim you." But he had been wrong. She didn't need to beg. The claiming was mutual. Had been from that first night when she'd chosen to save rather than surrender him. They belonged to each other now, for better or worse. Then let's go, she said. Let's find our gold and our freedom and our life together. Let the town wake to find us gone like smoke. Joseph climbed up beside her, taking the reins. As the wagon rolled out of Willow Creek, Margaret didn't look back. Behind them lay the past Samuel's grave, the store, the narrow life she'd been expected to live. Ahead waited the unknown, danger, certainly, maybe death, but also possibility, a chance to write their own story, neither Apache nor white, but something entirely their own. The moon lit their way as they headed into the mountains, into the vast darkness that promised either doom or deliverance. Margaret pressed close to Joseph's warmth, feeling the solid presence of him beside her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Two souls caught between worlds, finding home in each other. The wagon rolled on through the night, carrying them toward their uncertain future, while behind them Willow Creek slept on, unaware that its careful boundaries had already been crossed, its rules already broken by love that refused to recognize borders. The moon hung like a silver peso in the desert sky as Margaret made her way through the canyon to Joseph's camp. They'd been traveling for 2 days, putting distance between themselves and Willow Creek. But tonight something had shifted. The careful dance they'd been doing around each other since leaving town had become unbearable. She found him by the spring, watching moonlight ripple across the water. He turned at her approach, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "You should be sleeping," he said softly. "So should you." She moved closer, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "Joseph, we need to talk about what's happening between us." "What's happening is I'm trying to keep you safe. By barely speaking to me, by sleeping on the other side of camp like I have some disease." He turned away. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." She touched his arm, felt him flinch. "Please." Joseph was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with suppressed emotion. "That night in your store, when Cutter grabbed you, I wanted to kill him. Not just stop him. Kill him. Slowly." He faced her, and the raw hunger in his expression made her knees weak. "Do you understand now? What you've awakened in me isn't civilized. It isn't gentle. It's something that's been caged for years, and being near you makes it want to break free." Margaret's heart raced, but not from fear. "Maybe I don't want gentle." "Margaret." "No, listen to me." She stepped closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I've had gentle. I've had proper. I've had a marriage that was more partnership than passion. Samuel was a good man, but I never felt." She struggled for words. "With you, I feel alive. Truly alive. For the first time." "You don't know what you're asking." "Don't I?" She lifted her chin defiantly. "You think I haven't noticed how you watch me, how your hands shake when we accidentally touch you? Think I don't lie awake at night wondering what it would be like?" Joseph groaned. A sound pulled from deep in his chest. "You're playing with fire." "Then let me burn." The control he'd been maintaining shattered. In one fluid movement, he pulled her against him, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that matched her own. This wasn't the gentle kiss they'd shared in her kitchen. This was possession, promise and plea all at once. Margaret's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. She could taste his need, feel it in the way his body trembled against hers. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Margaret," he said against her lips, her name a prayer and a curse. "I know," she whispered. "I know we should be careful. I know this is madness. But Joseph, I've been dead inside for so long. You make me want to live. Truly live. Consequences be damned." He pulled back enough to look at her, one hand coming up to trace her cheek with heartbreaking tenderness. "In my culture, when a man takes a woman, it's forever. There's no changing minds, no going back." "Good," she said fiercely. "I don't want to go back. I want to go forward, with you, even knowing what I am, what we'll face. Especially knowing, she covered his hand with hers. Joseph, eyes that see far, I choose you, all of you, the Apache warrior, the mission student, the man caught between worlds. I choose the danger and the difficulty and the beauty of what we could be together. Something shifted in his expression, a wall finally crumbling. You remember my Apache name. I remember everything about you. She smiled, soft and sure. Now stop trying to protect me from something I'm walking into with eyes wide open. He studied her for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. Without a word, he took her hand and led her back to their camp. The moonlight turned everything to silver and shadow, making the moment feel otherworldly, sacred. At his bedroll, he paused. Are you certain once this happens? Margaret silenced him with a kiss. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. What followed was unlike anything she'd experienced before, where Samuel had been perfunctory, almost apologetic in their intimate moments. Joseph was present in every touch, every kiss, every whispered endearment that switched between English, Spanish, and Apache. He made love to her like she was something precious and powerful at once, worth worshipping and wild enough to match his own intensity. Later, as they lay entwined under the vast canopy of stars, Margaret traced the scars on his chest, some from battles, others from the mission's attempts to civilize him. Tell me something in Apache, she said. He was quiet for a moment, then spoke in his native tongue, the words flowing like water over stone. What does it mean? You are my heart walking outside my body. He pulled her closer. It's what we say when someone becomes essential to us, when living without them would be like living without breath. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. Teach me to say it. Patiently, he guided her through the pronunciation, smiling at her attempts. When she finally got it right, he kissed her deeply. My pronunciation is terrible. She laughed against his lips. It's perfect. He rolled them so she was beneath him, looking up at the stars past his shoulder. You're perfect. Far from it. She touched his face. But I'm yours. Sheila, he murmured. Mine. They made love again, slower this time, savoring each moment. Margaret understood now what she'd been missing all those years, not just physical pleasure, but true connection, the feeling of being seen, known, wanted for exactly who she was. As dawn began to paint the eastern sky, they finally dozed, exhausted and sated. Margaret woke to find Joseph watching her, his expression soft with wonder. Regrets? She asked, echoing his question from their last night in Willow Creek. Never. He kissed her forehead. Though we should move soon. We're exposed here. Reality crept back in. They were fugitives, heading into dangerous territory with only hope and Charlie's gold to sustain them. But Margaret found she didn't care. Whatever came, they would face it together. As they broke camp, working in comfortable synchronization, Margaret noticed Joseph moving differently. The careful distance he'd been maintaining was gone, replaced by casual touches, a hand on her waist as he helped her mount her horse, fingers brushing as he handed her the canteen, a quick kiss when he thought she looked worried. You're different, she observed as they rode. I'm whole, he replied simply. For the first time since they took me from my mother, I'm whole. They made good time that day, following trails Joseph remembered from his youth. As the sun set, they made camp in a sheltered grove of cottonwoods near a small stream. Tomorrow we'll reach the first marker, Joseph said as they shared a simple meal. The real danger begins then. Army patrols, maybe Apache scouts. Will your people really hunt us for taking the gold? If they find out, yes, gold is sacred, it belongs to the mountain spirits. But, he squeezed her hand. My grandfather said it was for times of great need. I think he'd understand. Margaret leaned against his shoulder. Tell me about him. He was a powerful man, a dreamer who could see things before they happened. He's the one who gave me my name, said I would need to see far to navigate the path ahead. Joseph smiled sadly. I wonder if he saw you. Maybe he did. Maybe that's why he told you about the gold. That night, they made their bed under the stars again. As Joseph held her, Margaret marveled at how natural it felt, how right. In town, behind walls and windows, their relationship would have been scandalous, impossible. But out here, with only the desert and sky as witnesses, it simply was. I love you, she said into the darkness, the words coming easily now. Shenila, he replied, you are my heart. Teach me more, she said. Teach me everything. I want to know all of you. So he did, sharing words and stories as the night deepened. He taught her practical phrases and sacred ones, told her about ceremonies and traditions, about the complex web of relationships that made up Apache life. Where we're going, he said eventually. If we make it, if we find somewhere safe, would you marry me? Not in your way, we can do that too if you want, but in mine. Margaret raised up on one elbow to look at him. Tell me about it. It's simple. We would stand before witnesses in this case, probably just the spirits and the stars, and declare our intention, exchange gifts, make promises. He touched her face. But Margaret, in Apache marriage, the woman holds great power. The home is hers. The children are hers. If she decides to end it, the man must leave with nothing but what he brought. And what are you bringing? She asked, touched by his vulnerability. Myself, my skills, my love, my promise to provide and protect and honor you all my days. He smiled. And whatever gold we find. Then yes, she said. Yes to all of it. Your way, my way. Any way that makes us belong to each other. He pulled her down for a kiss that was both fierce and tender. You already belong to me, and I to you. The ceremony is just for the world to witness what already is. They loved each other slowly, thoroughly, as if they had all the time in the world instead of being hunted fugitives racing toward an uncertain future. But in that moment, under the ancient stars, they were simply two people who had found each other against all odds. When sleep finally claimed them, they were entwined so closely it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The desert night sang its eternal song around them, coyotes calling, owls hunting, the wind whispering secrets to the sage. Tomorrow would bring danger, difficult choices, the constant threat of discovery. But tonight, they had this skin and stars, love and belonging, two hearts learning to beat as one. Margaret's last thought before dreams took her was that Joseph had been wrong that night in her store. She hadn't begged him to claim her. She had claimed him just as fiercely, just as completely. They were each other's now, for better or worse. Until the desert gave up its dead. The crack of a rifle shot echoed across the canyon just as the sun touched the horizon. Margaret's horse reared, and Joseph grabbed her reins, pulling both animals behind a cluster of boulders. Bandits, he said tersely, scanning the ridgeline. 3, maybe 4. They'd been traveling for 5 days since leaving the spring, following ancient Apache trails deeper into the mountains. The gold was close. Joseph could feel it in the way the land spoke to him, but they'd known this stretch would be dangerous. Another shot sparked off the rocks. A voice called down in Spanish, demanding they throw out their weapons and goods. Can we outrun them? Margaret asked, checking her rifle. Not with the wagon, and they know these trails too. Joseph's mind raced through options. But I know something they don't. He whistled sharply, a sound that could have been a bird call. Margaret watched in amazement as he seemed to read the wind itself, then pointed to a narrow cleft in the rocks. Through there, leave the wagon. They grabbed what they could carry: water, ammunition, food, Charlie's gold, and slipped into the passage just as the bandits started down the slope. The cleft was barely wide enough for the horses, twisting through the rock like a snake. Behind them, Shouts of anger echoed as the bandits found the abandoned wagon. Joseph led them deeper into the maze, through passages that seemed impossible until you were right on them. "Apache's secret," he murmured when they paused to rest. "These paths are sacred. The rocks remember." They climbed through the night, navigating by moon and instinct. By dawn, they emerged on a high plateau with a clear view of the country behind. No sign of pursuit. "They won't follow," Joseph said with satisfaction. "They're afraid of Apache ghosts in these mountains." "Are there ghosts?" Margaret asked, only half joking. "Everywhere." He touched a petroglyph carved into the stone. "This is my people's land. Every canyon holds stories. Every spring has a guardian. We're not alone here." As if to prove his point, they found fresh deer tracks near a hidden spring, shot a fat turkey that seemed to present itself for their supper. "The land provided," Joseph explained, "if you knew how to ask." That night, camping in a sheltered grove, Margaret practiced with the bow Joseph had made her from a juniper branch. "You're trying too hard," he said, adjusting her stance. "Don't fight the bow. Become partners with it." She drew again, and this time the arrow flew true, striking the target dead center. "Better." His hands lingered on her waist. "You learn quickly." "I have a good teacher." She turned in his arms. "Show me more." He taught her to read sign the difference between deer and elk tracks, how to tell how long ago an animal passed, what the birds' calls meant. He showed her edible plants and medicinal ones, how to find water by watching the bees. "Your people's women know all this?" she asked. "And more. Apache women are strong. They own the homes, raise the children, gather the food that sustains the tribe. A man without a woman's support is nothing. And an Apache man, what does he provide? Protection, meat from hunting, horses from raiding." He smiled. "And if he's lucky, children to carry on the bloodline." Margaret felt heat rise in her cheeks. They'd been careful since that night by the spring. But... "Joseph," she began, then stopped. How to tell him what she suspected but wasn't certain of. He read her face, understanding dawning. "Margaret, I don't know for sure, but I'm late, and I've been sick in the mornings." His hands framed her face with infinite tenderness. "A child. Maybe, probably." She searched his eyes. "Are you angry?" "Angry?" He kissed her deeply. "You're giving me everything. A home, a future, maybe a child. How could I be angry? The timing isn't ideal. We're running for our lives." "Children come when they come. Apache women have given birth on the move for generations." He placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. "Our child will be strong, born between worlds, like us." They held each other as the fire burned low, planning a future that seemed both impossible and inevitable. The next day brought new challenges. A cavalry patrol passed below their position, forcing them to wait motionless for hours. Margaret watched Joseph during the wait, saw how he became part of the landscape itself, more still than the stones around them. When the soldiers finally moved on, they continued their journey, climbing ever higher into mountains that seemed to touch the sky itself. The air grew thin and cold, but also crystalline, pure. On the 7th day, Joseph stopped at a distinctive rock formation, 3 spires reaching toward heaven like fingers. "Close now," he said. "My grandfather said to look for the place where the eagle speaks to the sun." They searched until afternoon, when Margaret noticed something. "There," she pointed. "That shadow on the cliff face, doesn't it look like an eagle?" Joseph studied it, then smiled. "Your eyes see far too— Yes, that's it." The shadow led them to a narrow cave, barely visible unless you knew to look. Inside, wrapped in rotted leather, lay Apache gold nuggets and Spanish coins, jewelry and raw ore. Enough to start a new life anywhere. "Your grandfather was a wise man," Margaret said softly. He knew this day would come, when the old ways would end, Joseph selected what they could carry. We take only what we need. The rest stays for others who might come after. As they prepared to leave, voices echoed from below, Apache voices. Joseph went rigid. Hunters, maybe scouts. He listened intently. They're talking about us. Someone saw our tracks. Your people. Maybe. Or reservation Apache working for the army. He made a quick decision. We go now. Fast. Down the other side of the mountain. They fled through terrain that would have been impossible for anyone not raised to it. Margaret trusted Joseph completely, following where he led even when paths seemed to disappear into sheer cliff faces. Behind them, the voices grew closer. At a river crossing, their luck ran out. 3 Apache warriors emerged from the rocks, rifles ready. Joseph pushed Margaret behind him, speaking rapidly in Apache. The lead warrior, scarred and weather-beaten, answered harshly. Margaret caught a few words: traitor, white woman, sacred gold. He says I've proven what I am. Joseph translated quietly, that taking you and the gold shows my true heart. Tell him we took only what we need. Margaret said, tell him about the child. Joseph's eyes widened, but he spoke again. The warriors listened, their expressions shifting slightly. The scarred one stepped forward, studying Margaret with dark eyes. Then, surprisingly, he spoke in accented English. You carry an Apache child? I believe so, Margaret answered steadily. And you go willingly with this man? He doesn't force you. I go because I love him, because we belong together. The warrior was silent for a long moment. Then he said something to Joseph in Apache and stepped aside. What did he say? Margaret asked as they hurried past. He said the child changes things, that new life is sacred, even mixed blood life. Joseph's voice was thick with emotion. He said to go far and never return. They rode hard for 3 days, putting distance between themselves and any pursuit. The landscape changed from pine forests to desert, from red rocks to golden grasslands. Finally, exhausted and travel-worn, they reached a trading post on the California border. The proprietor, a weathered Mexican named Diego, asked no questions when Joseph paid in gold. You folks heading west? He asked while Margaret bought supplies. Yes, Joseph answered, looking for a place to start fresh. Diego studied them, the Apache man, the white woman, the careful way they moved together. Try the valley beyond San Bernardino. Good land, not too many questions. Mixed folks do well there. They thanked him and continued west, toward the setting sun and whatever future awaited them. That night, camping under stars that seemed different from the Arizona sky, Margaret asked, Do you regret it, leaving everything behind? Joseph pulled her close. I left nothing. Everything I value is right here. But your people gave me permission to go, in their way. That warrior, I knew him as a boy. He could have killed us both. Instead, he gave us a chance. He touched her belly gently. For this child, for our future. Margaret covered his hand with hers. Then we honor that chance. We build something new. Together, he agreed. Neither Apache nor white, but something else. Something ours. They made love under the open sky, consecrating their journey with passion and promise. In the morning, they would continue west, toward a place where they could be simply Joseph and Margaret, husband and wife, parents-to-be. But tonight, they were wanderers between worlds, carrying gold and hope and new life into an uncertain future. The desert had tested them, pursued them, and ultimately released them. Now it was time to see what they could build with their freedom. The California sun was different from Arizona's, gentler somehow, filtered through coastal mist even this far inland. Margaret stood on the porch of their small ranch house, watching their daughter chase chickens across the yard, her laughter bright as morning. Maria Elena, careful, she called as the 4-year-old stumbled. But the child was up again instantly, sturdy and fearless, her father's daughter in temperament, if not in looks. She had Margaret's green eyes and auburn hair, but Joseph's grace and instinct for the land. "She's fine," Joseph said, coming up behind Margaret, arms encircling her waist. "Apache children learn by doing." "Half Apache," Margaret corrected, leaning into his warmth. "The stronger half," he teased, then grew serious as a rider appeared on the horizon. Old habits died hard. They both tensed until recognizing their neighbor, Tom Brennan. "Morning, folks," Tom called, dismounting. "Brought that seed you wanted, Joe, and Mary sent preserves for Margaret." 5 years, and still the easy acceptance of this valley surprised her. Their neighbors knew what Joseph was, saw their mixed-blood children, and simply didn't care. Out here, everyone was running from something or toward something. Questions weren't asked if you proved yourself a good neighbor. "Stay for coffee?" Margaret offered. "Can't today. Got to help the Vasquez family with their barn raising." Tom remounted. "You folks coming Saturday could use Joe's eye for straight lines." "We'll be there," Joseph promised. After Tom left, they worked together in comfortable rhythm, Joseph tending the horses while Margaret gathered eggs. Their son. Samuel Two Rivers, named for the grandfather he'd never met and the heritage he carried. Helped by carrying the basket, solemn and careful at 2 years old. That evening, as they always did, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. Maria Elena curled against Joseph's side while he told stories, sometimes Apache tales of coyote and eagle, sometimes Shakespeare translated into simple words, sometimes invented adventures of children who lived between worlds. "Tell about how you met Mama," Maria Elena demanded, as she often did. Joseph smiled at Margaret. "Well, little one, your mama found me when I was hurt and lost. She was brave enough to help a stranger, even when everyone said she shouldn't. Because she saw your good heart," Maria Elena recited, knowing this part by heart. "That's right, and I saw hers." Margaret took up the thread. "We had to go on a big adventure together, through mountains and deserts, facing dangers and finding treasures. Like in the stories." "Exactly like the stories," Joseph agreed. "And the best treasure we found was love, and from that love came you and your brother." Later, after the children slept, Margaret and Joseph sat together in the cooling night air. She was working on a letter while he carved a toy horse for Samuel. "Who are you writing to now?" he asked, amused. Margaret had become a prolific correspondent, connecting with other mixed families across the West. Sarah Mitchell in Oregon. Her husband is Modoc, and they're facing some trouble with the local school board. She set down her pen. "I thought perhaps sharing how we handled things here might help." It hadn't been easy. Those first years, some people in town had objected when they'd enrolled Maria Elena in school, but Margaret had stood firm, Joseph beside her, and slowly minds had changed. It helped that Joseph had proven himself breaking horses better than any man in the valley, helping neighbors without being asked, even serving as translator when a group of Mexican traders had disputes with local ranchers. "You're building something important with these letters," Joseph said. "A different kind of tribe." "A tribe of in-between people," Margaret agreed. "Like us." He set aside the carving and drew her onto his lap. "No regrets." It was their old ritual, this question, Margaret answered as she always did. "Never you." "How could I regret the life we've built?" He gestured to their home, simple but solid. The thriving garden, the healthy animals. "I have a wife who matches me in stubbornness and strength. Children who'll grow up free to be both and neither. Work that feeds us. Neighbors who judge us by our actions, not our blood. And your heritage, your people." This was newer territory, something they'd only begun discussing as the children grew. "I teach them what I can. The language, the stories, the skills. It's not the same as growing up Apache, but it's something." He was quiet for a moment. "Perhaps it's better. They'll know both worlds from the start. not have to choose between them. Margaret thought of Maria Elena, switching effortlessly between English and Apache, equally comfortable in dresses or buckskins. Of Samuel, too young yet to understand his uniqueness, but already showing his father's gift for reading the land. "I've been thinking," she said slowly, "about writing it down. Our story. The real story, not the one people would expect." Joseph considered this. The truth. As much truth as the world can handle. About love that crosses boundaries. About finding home in each other rather than in places. About the cost of belonging nowhere and the freedom it can bring. Who would read such a story? Other women like me. Maybe men like you. Children like ours who need to know they're not alone. She traced patterns on his chest. "Would you mind if I told our story? Would you use our real names?" "Changed ones, but the heart of it would be true." He kissed her forehead. "Then write it. Let people know that their neat categories don't hold everyone. That sometimes the most dangerous thing two people can do is love each other across the divide." They sat in companionable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Inside, one of the children stirred, whimpering. Joseph rose to check, returning with Samuel in his arms. "Bad dream," he explained, settling back with the boy against his chest. Margaret watched them, her Apache husband and their mixed-blood son, bathed in starlight on their California porch, so far from where they'd started, yet exactly where they belonged. "Remember what you told me that night?" she asked softly. "About begging?" Joseph's eyes gleamed with memory and mischief. "I was young and foolish, thought I understood desire. And now I know better. The begging goes both ways, every day. I'm grateful you chose me. Every night, I thank whatever spirits led me to your barn." "Shinila," she said, pronunciation perfect now after years of practice. "You are my heart." "And you are mine," he replied, "always." Samuel stirred, opening eyes that were Margaret's green mixed with Joseph's depth. "Story," he mumbled hopefully. "One story," Margaret agreed. "Which one do you want?" "The bridge story," Samuel said sleepily. Joseph smiled. It was their children's favorite, about two people who became a bridge between worlds, strong enough to carry others across. A story that was metaphor and truth, promise and prophecy. As Joseph began the tale, his voice weaving English and Apache into something uniquely theirs, Margaret felt the deep satisfaction of a life fully lived. They'd risked everything for love, faced dangers and prejudice, lost old lives to build a new one, and it had been worth every moment. Their love had created a home where boundaries blurred, where children grew up bilingual and proud, where neighbors became family regardless of blood, where two people who'd belonged nowhere finally belonged to each other. The candle burned low as the story wound to its end. Samuel was asleep again, safe in his father's arms. Maria Elena appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "I heard stories," she complained. "Come here, little one," Margaret said, making room. And there they sat, the four of them, under stars that blessed mixed-blood children and brave lovers alike. Joseph continued the story, voice soft in the darkness, while Margaret held their daughter and touched their son's sleeping head. This was what she'd write, she decided. Not just their romance, though that was part of it, but the quiet victory of daily love, the triumph of building a family that the world said couldn't exist, the beauty of being neither one thing nor another, but something entirely new. And they lived. Joseph concluded the story, as he always did. Not happily ever after, because that's for fairy tales, but they lived fully and truly, making their own path between the worlds. "I like that ending." Maria Elena yawned. "So do I," Margaret agreed, meeting Joseph's eyes over their children's heads. "So do I." As they carried the children back to bed, Margaret thought about the woman she'd been alone in her store, talking to ghosts. going through motions of living without truly being alive. That woman would never have imagined this future. But that woman had found the courage to save a wounded stranger, to choose love over safety, to build a bridge between worlds with nothing but hope and determination. "Thank you," she whispered to Joseph as they returned to their own bed. "For what?" "For stumbling into my barn, for refusing to let me save you without saving me in return, for this life we've built." He pulled her close, and she felt the familiar warmth of coming home. "Thank you for seeing me, all of me, and choosing to love what you saw." Outside, a coyote called to the moon, and the wind carried the scent of orange blossoms from their small orchard. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, children to raise, neighbors to help, letters to write, stories to preserve. But tonight, in their bed built by Joseph's hands in the house they'd made their own, Margaret Thornton now, Margaret Two Rivers in all but law, lay in the arms of the man who'd taught her that love could indeed cross any boundary, survive any trial, and create something beautiful from the broken pieces of two incomplete worlds. They'd been neither nor, and in that space between definitions, they'd found everything. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale, whether you're listening during your commute, relaxing at home, or perhaps on your own adventure. Please subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and connections make our community richer. Just like Margaret and Joseph's love made their world bigger than either could have imagined alone.